So let's talk about the x values and the y values of the points on this relation. So for the x values, we see that any possible x value is possible. So what we're talking about are all the real numbers: irrational, rational, integers, whole numbers, natural numbers, all of the numbers. And if we're talking about the y values, we can see that nothing goes below -4. So we're talking about -4 and up. We're talking about real numbers that are greater than or equal to -4. In this example, we have a piece of a curve, and if we're talking about the x values, it looks like we're going from 1 to 2, but we see these two circles. One of them is colored in, one of them is open. We say that this is an open circle and this is closed. And what that means is we are taking all the values except the ones at that point. So we're talking about real numbers. X is an element of the real set of real numbers. And x is greater than 1. So I'm going to write it this way. And x is less than or equal to 2. So for our y values, they are also real numbers. And they start at 2 or just above 2, and they go up to 3, including 3. So the way we're going to write that is, oops, that's a 3. So y is greater than 2, y is less than or equal to 3. Okay, here we've got a linear relation, and it looks like it keeps going in both directions. So for the x values, we have all the real numbers, and we have all the real numbers for the y values as well. And we know we have all the real values because none of them are skipped. So if you pick any, if you can think of any number, eventually it'll occur as an x value of a point on this line or a y value of a point on this line. Okay, in this situation, we have a number of line segments, and you'll notice that the ends of the line segments either have a colored in circle or an open circle. And basically what that's saying is there is not a point at 2, 0, but there is a point at 2, 1. Okay, so it's everything up until just before the 2. And then on this line we go from 1 all the way up until just before 4. So if we're looking at the x values of this relation, and we're going to make the assumption that it continues in this direction and it continues in this direction, and that tells us that none of the real values are skipped. So we're actually taking all of the real numbers for x values. Now if we look at the y values of the points in this relation, so we're considering all these points, all these points, all these points, all these points. We've got 0 for these points for the y-coordinates of these points. We have 1 for the y-coordinates of these points, 2 for the y-coordinates of these points, and so on. So what you can see is that the y values are not all the real numbers, but in fact just the integers. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and -1, -2, -3 to infinity. Okay, so in this situation, it looks like the curve starts here and it continues in this direction. We're going to again make the assumption that it continues moving to the right. And so our x values are going to be real numbers, but only the real numbers that are over 2. So we're not actually not including the number 2 because this circle is open. So it's everything after 2. Now, taking a look at the y values, these are also real numbers. And we can see that they start just below 4 and they approach 2. So they're getting closer and closer to 2, but if you zoom out more and more and more and more, what's actually happening is the curve is getting closer and closer to 2, but it never actually reaches 2. And we call this imaginary line here, this horizontal line, an asymptote, okay? Because the curve is approaching this line but not actually ever touching it. So what's happening with y is it is between 2 and 4, but it's never actually 2 or 4 in this case. So in this situation, we actually have two asymptotes, one of them being horizontal over here, and one of them vertical located right here. And if we zoom out, we can see that a little bit more clearly. It's at a value of x equal to -1, and a y value of 3 in this case. So the x values are real numbers that are less than 1. So we can say x is less than, -1. And the y values are real numbers that are less than 3.